Well, hello everyone, and welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, Director of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and I want to thank you for tuning in for tonight's event. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy and sane, which, speaking for myself, seems to be the tougher task lately. Tonight's presentation, which will feature Curator Katherine Gass Stowe interviewing photographer Michael Christopher Brown, is part of a larger exploration currently underway here at BMAC of homelessness. That exploration involves two exhibits, which I hope you'll come see in person here at the museum, one of which was curated by Katherine, and a series of related events, including this one tonight. Our hope, and truthfully, it's been our experience, is that art can sometimes provide a perspective on a challenging topic that allows for greater understanding and empathy and even problem solving. So to that end, I'm really grateful that you're all here tonight and participating. And I hope you'll consider joining us for several more conversations about homelessness and related issues that we have scheduled for August and September. You can find more information about those on our website, which is www.brattleboromuseum.org. Here's how this event is going to work tonight. I will be leaving the screen shortly, at which point Michael and Katie will come on. When they're finished with their conversation, probably at around 8:15 or so, I'll come back on and we'll have a Q&A. If you're joining us via Zoom, there are a couple ways you can participate in the Q&A. You can type in your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And you can do that while the presentation is underway or afterwards when we actually get to the Q&A. The other option, which is only available during the actual Q&A session, is to use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. When you do that, we'll be notified that you want to ask a question and we'll be able to unmute you so you can ask your question yourself rather than typing it in. But again, we'll only be using the raise hand function during the Q&A session at the end, not while the presentation is underway. You'll also see that there's a chat button. That's there for you to send a message to me or to our behind the scenes events manager, Jessica Nelson, if you're having any technical issues or something like that. But please don't use the chat button for your questions. Use the Q&A button or the raise hand function for those. If you're here via Facebook Live and you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, just use the comment box and Jessica will relay your comments to me when we get to the Q&A. Okay, before I turn the screen over to Michael and Katie, I just want to extend a very special thank you to Groundworks Collaborative of Brattleboro for their help and guidance in organizing the events we're holding this summer and fall on the topic of homelessness. And I'd also like to thank the Thomas Thompson Trust for their generous support of this project and so many other worthy causes in the Brattleboro area. And now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's presenters. Michael Christopher Brown is an extraordinary photographer known for his documentation of the 2011 Libyan Civil War and the resulting monograph, Libyan Sugar, which won an ICP Infinity Award for Best Artist Book of 2017. Born and raised in the state of Washington, Michael is now based in Los Angeles. His work as a photojournalist and documentary photographer has taken him all over the world. He's a contributor to National Geographic, the New York Times Magazine, and many other publications. In 2016, Michael produced Paradiso, a multimedia project on the electronic music and youth scene in Havana. And in 2018, he released the book Yo Soy Fidel, which follows the cortege of Fidel Castro over a period of several days in late 2016. Michael's work is filled with honesty and heart, and it's truly an honor for us to be sharing it with you tonight. Katherine Gass Stowe is a curator based in New Hampshire and New York, and the founder of James Company Contemporary Art Projects. She's the curator for Bank of America in the New York metropolitan region. She has held posts at the Whitney Museum and the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum, and she has curated exhibitions for the Hall Art Foundation, the Beekman Hotel, and many other institutions. She received her MA in the History of American Art Advocacy from the Gallatin School at New York University. We began working with Katie a couple years ago, and it's been an absolute joy. We're so grateful for the exhibitions, the ideas, and the artwork that she's brought to BMAC and our audiences. So with that said, it's my great pleasure to welcome Michael Christopher Brown and Katherine Gass Stowe.
Thank you, Danny, for that really nice introduction. And there he is. Hey, Michael.
Hello.
Hello, hello. First, I want to give a really hearty thank you to Danny and the Brattleboro Museum for hosting us and hosting this talk. I'm really excited because I'm a huge fan of your work. And since I became familiar with your work in 2017, I'll just tell everybody a little bit about how we met, and then we can get into the good stuff. But I was invited to the Infinity Awards, the 2017 Infinity Awards by Mark Lubell, the director of ICP, and his wife, Jennifer Tripp. And it was there that I saw the film about your book, Libyan Sugar. And it was just completely blown away. And I really urge people to go to the ICP website. I think we're going to have a link through the museum as well to that film and that body of work and more about your book. It was an incredibly intense time for you. You lost 2 colleagues in a bombing in which you were very badly wounded. You ended up going back and sort of, I don't know if it's fair to say finishing your story there, but there was a part 2. And then, many other projects ensued since then. So it was really your current Skid Row series that I've been following on Instagram that I was really eager to talk to you about. We're going to go through your work, obviously, but we will end with that series. And as it connects to a show up at the museum right now called Stephen Kinder, 552,830, which is the number of American homeless as of last year. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this will work. Make sure, Michael, you can tell me if it's up. Okay. So you grew up in a rural community in Skagit Valley. Is that how you pronounce it? Skagit?
Skagit Valley.
Skagit Valley, Washington. You were surrounded by farms and indigenous communities, native communities, you said. And in our conversations, you mentioned 2 things that really seemed to mark your youth and that would affect your lifelong relationship with photography. One was a speech impediment in your early youth, and the other was a major knee injury at 16. And in addition, your dad was also an amateur photographer, and you had a darkroom at home. So can you tell me a bit about how your early youth shaped your work and the way you approach your work?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, Katie. This is great to speak to you in this format. This is my first Instagram live, or Zoom Instagram, Facebook live.
It should be the inaugural everything. That's awesome. Fantastic.
So, yeah, my when I was very I had a speech impediment from a very early age. As far back as I can remember, I wanted to sort of escape having to speak. So photography was one of the things, along with writing, um, that I learned at a fairly young age, um, that helped me to express myself in the world and to communicate. Of course, at that time, I was very young, and my photographic skill is still evolving nowadays. But at that time, it was very much sort of just learning how to use the camera. But from a fairly young age, 13 or 14, I realized that it could be um, that it was an outlet. It was a path, a way to communicate. That regardless of sort of um, my verbal communication, and if that would evolve or not. You can imagine being a kid in class and like uh, being called on, or knowing that you're going to be called on, and just your greatest fear in the world is that. And so I can remember many days like going to the nurse's office and going to the medical clinic and just having them call my mother, and so she would come to the school and get me. um, but the other way that the other um, vehicle that I had to sort of release the energy that I had and communicate was sports. And so I was really into the outdoors. And when I was about 15, I injured my knee very badly. And so it was really at that point that I became much more focused on black and white photography. My dad had a had a dark room in the house that my uncles had constructed, and so um, it was very, it was like an adventure in a way, just going out into the Skagit Valley and photographing people, and within an hour coming home and processing that and seeing the results of that on film, and then making prints. Um, and I would just sort of, drive around and follow my nose, and I would meet people through friends of our family. The valley's grown, but it's still a pretty fairly small community. A lot of people know each other. So,
How old
um,
were you when you were taking these pictures that we're seeing there?
this was in my early 20s. I was probably 21 or 22 or something. So this is a few years after the fact, in college. Um, and
Hmm.
the other thing is, my father's he's a physician now still. Um, and when I was a kid, he would keep these Polaroids around the house of his operations, and
Hmm.
his approach. It was almost like sketches of his, the procedures that he had to do. So from like, again, as far back as I can remember, um, I would see this imagery that might be seen as sort of gory or horrific, and just understand that it was part of our body. And but there was also a curiosity about that began with the images I saw, and then the butcher, and all the way up into war and conflict. So this is my dad, and he was always just photographing our family and friends. And he he made a number of trips overseas. So he went to Haiti, Romania, Mexico, and other places, working in orphanages. And while he was there, he would record some of the surroundings and the patients, and he would share that imagery with the community when he arrived back home. So um, really, some of the most powerful presentations I've seen in my life happened in our living room on the slide projector. Him just sharing images of his trips and his relationship with my mother, seen here, and my family, and his friends, and those were kind of some of the first multimedia presentations I ever saw. And so there was this special, he sort of, from him I learned how to use the camera, and I also learned about light, quality of light and the power of light, and so I began, I became very interested in, even though I grew up in the farming community and I photographed a lot of landscapes and my surroundings, I became more interested in photographing people. But I was very shy and nervous, and so I spent, a lot of time photographing my family.
Yeah, your subjects.
Yeah. So I would follow my dad and go to his work, or photograph my mom at her work, and pretty soon they, after not very long, they became so comfortable with the camera, it wasn't a big deal. At some point I could photograph anything. These are some of his images. This is my sister and I as kids. This is pretty much right in front of the house where I grew up. There's some farm workers at the end of the day.
And these are some samples of your landscapes you were just referring to. Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I think so. No, I think this is for...
Yeah, no, that's correct. These are also some of
These
the
are-
early landscapes as well.
This
Yeah.
A little bit later in the...
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have sent you these a little out of order. So.
No, that's perfect. These remind me, the question, these sort of now start to beg that second question. Although I think we're missing the tulip fields. I'm just going to keep going through these.
There's a lot. I sent you a lot of photographs.
I love it. It's fabulous.
There
Yeah,
were a lot of images I saw that I hadn't seen in a long time. Yeah, these images here are pretty much right in front of the house where I grew up.
beautiful. Vista.
And, my friends going skiing. When I hurt my knee, I couldn't ski as well as I could before, so I would just photograph my friends instead. It was never quite the same, but... And then exploring Seattle and just going to the city and walking around. And going to events. I was really influenced early on by National Geographic and some of their photographers, and I would just spend, long hours at the library going through those books, their monographs, and various photo magazines, and
Yeah, we had talked about that. You've had really formal training. You've got a BA in psychology and a minor in studio art from Western Washington University, and an MA in documentary photography from Ohio University. But you had shared that it was really looking through books, trying to figure out how people made photographs.
yeah, like
Your education.
yeah, for sure. In the same way that if you're a writer, the more you read, when you're a photographer, the more you see, the more you look at photography books. I found it extremely helpful just in education in itself. And yeah, I would just spend like long hours in the library, on the floor of the library, or at home, especially at night under the light, just like looking at photographs and trying to figure out how the pictures were made, and the approach of the photographer. And so, these were like late high school or early college years, and I met some photographers in the Skagit Valley and not far away who sort of helped me and guided me as mentors. And that was incredibly made a huge impact because, at the time I had all this, I really wanted to become a photographer. I was getting out of school and, I needed to find a way to make money. And I was working for my uncles doing construction. And, but the photography that I was doing for the most part was very sort of news photography.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with a weekly newspaper and such.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saved up quite a bit of money and I went to Mexico for a little over a month and I just hitchhiked around Mexico. I was planning on going to school at Ohio University, the School of Visual Communication. But Mexico was a way that I could just sort of, I had one camera and one lens and just, travel around and have an adventure and just photograph on the street. And, I'd gone to Mexico a few times as a kid, I guess. And, but there was something about traveling on my own and hitchhiking that was just it was very free. And so I sort of went from Mexico into Ohio though I was excited about Ohio and I was excited about the program and meeting people and making connections and everything, it was a somewhat of a hard adjustment, going from this exotic place to Middle America.
I can imagine. I went to college in Ohio too. It was shocking.
Which school did you go to?
Ohio Wesleyan.
Okay.
So
Yeah, the school was great. I loved OU. Viscom was great. It really helped me make more connections in the field, so I could eventually get a newspaper internship and gain a little more recognition. And it was really at Ohio that I had more opportunities for contests, and so I won this College Photographer of the Year contest, and I remember that really helped a lot because eventually I got an internship at National Geographic with that, because of that.
Was that before or after your internship with Annie Griffith, who was one of the first female photographers for Nat Geo?
Yeah.
She said
So
she
I
was
met
very influential.
I met Annie before going to school at Ohio, and she had a workshop near my home in the Skagit Valley. And I went to the workshop and I was asking her how I can get into magazine photography. And she said one way to get into it, because I didn't have any connections, or really know anyone. I didn't have a lot of experience, was to go to Ohio. Because there, you learn a lot, in a short period of time from other people who've already had experience in the business, and not only the instructors, but the other students. And I was in my early 20s, so I was one of the youngest in the class. There were other people who already had years experience in the newspaper industry and magazines and such. So this is one of the first projects that I worked on in Ohio. It was about a boxing gym. It was in this former coal mining town. And this boxer, his name was Fruget, and he was maybe 19 at the time. And it was a sort of, was the kind of reflection of me in a sense too, of always sort of being somehow identifying with the underdog in a sense. And
Well, we talked about that autobiography that you love, Robert Frank's book, The Lines of My Hand.
yeah,
A very autobiographical, self-reflective book. I mean, he became famous for The Americans, but that was sort of a lifelong work of his. So that just makes sense to me to bring up now while you're talking about that.
yeah, Lines in My Hand was, of course, the Americans was also influential, but there was something about the lines of my hand was just, felt so free to me. There was no sort of structure that I expected in it. After already having looked at a lot of photo books, probably hundreds at that point. And there was something about that book that was just really spoke to me. And it's, I have a copy here on my shelf, and I come back to it all the time when I feel like I'm in a rut. I just, I open it up and I look at it, and it sort of reminds me that because I have a tendency with my work, I sort of, because I've always worked as a photojournalist, that's how I've made money. I've had to make a living so I can do this, and so I can, continue working on my own projects. So I always have, gone back and forth between photojournalism and, you could call it art, or more long-term documentary work. And so my work is sort of all over the map in that sense. And lines in my hand, of course, is one extreme, and then the photo story, the classic photo story, is kind of the other extreme. And so Congo was one of the, actually Congo was after Libya. I lived in Congo for 3 years, and worked there sort of on and off for 4 years. I'm working on a series of 3 books now about the Congo experience, which was immense. And it's the recent events in the U.S. with George Floyd, and sort of sparked this this interest in me to make this work now, even though I made this work between 2012 and 2016. I had always seen this work in a certain way, and certainly while I was there, just as a foreigner living and working in Congo, and a white male American, I have, we all have a history in our influences, and that, in our conditioning, that sort of can predict how we see the world. And I think
was this an assignment, just to
Congo.
jump back? What can you give a little tiny background on why you went there?
Yeah. This was an assignment that was about mobile technology, and the source of this mobile technology. Many of the minerals that are necessary for mobile phones and laptops, they come from the Congo. In fact, some of them are pretty much solely from the Congo. And so the tantalum is one of the minerals, and they were calling that sort of the new rubber of the 21st century, because rubber at some point was sort of the one of the primary ways King Leopold sort of made money on Congo. But so it began that way, and I went to Congo to sort of go into the mines and to photograph there, but also meet the people who were affected by this sort of free-for-all mining. The country is still unstable. It's been unstable for a long time, and part of the reason for that is because of the mineral trade, and just it's, in a sense, the more unstable Congo is, the more control that the government and multinationals have over the prices of minerals coming from the mines. So there is an interest in keeping the place unstable. And but it's incredibly complicated. Like, that is not, by any means like the one sentence, description for what
Well,
is
there
happening there. But
three books you said that you're creating or have created three different looks at Congo around the social structures in three different ways. So these are images from each of those three books, just sort of a handful from across the project.
yeah, so these are my images, but so this would be, so I'm making three books. One of the books will consist of my work, which is sort of an overview. It's sort of it's more contextual, and there will be a lot of information about the history of Congo. And with most of the images in the book, there will be, a fair amount of context, and so you understand why the image is in the book, and also how the image relates to the other photographs in the book. So my work is more like it really is sort of a the parachute sort of 40,000 foot perspective in a sense, but the more intimate work is in the other books. So there's one book that is a series of photographs that were a photo album that was owned by a former Congolese commando named Maro Dagbingza, who was killed in a mortar attack a few years ago, along with my friend and this colonel at the time, Mamadou. And he was assassinated, and she was there. And before that happened, I made a series of interviews with her about her life, and so the book will contain her photographs from her life, which includes imagery of herself in the military and herself at home and with her friends and such. And it's really
When are they coming out?
There's no like set date yet. I'm still working on them, and it might take a while. I've already like made one draft copy, but they need quite a bit more work. But I'm hoping by the winter. And then the other book is a series of work that was created by a Congolese photographer, and he's a studio photographer, and it also includes a lot of self-portraits, and I also interviewed him, and so the book will have those interviews as well. So really through their work you get you see these amazing vernacular photographs, and you sort of get this inside view on the Congolese, and then my work is kind of on the outside, on the boundary, to give a little more context. And this work, this Cuba work, this is after Congo. Not long after Congo, I began spending a fair amount of time in Cuba, sort of months at a time over a period of a couple years. And this group of youth I met sort of in the beginning of those trips, and they were DJs of electronic music and their friends, and this was really just an exploration of youth culture, and pretty much.
Castro, I feel like there was some connection to liberation as well in this body of work.
Yeah, well, these images were made before Fidel died. In fact, when I was making these images, it was in the a couple years before, or like a year and a half, I guess, before his death, and there were rumors this entire time that he had already died. There were always these rumors in Cuba, but these were the children who sort of came of age in the special period, and they were sort of the result of somehow the result of Fidel's policies, and they many of them would use this medication here, levodopa, which was for Parkinson's, but when you have enough of it, it gives you like this surreal feeling, of just being free. And so they would sort of, consume this and go and play their music and, go to these all-night parties. And coincidentally, it was the same medication that, according to the CIA, at least, Fidel was on, because it was known or rumored that he had Parkinson's. So it was interesting how both of them were using this to sort of, stay alive in a sense. They felt trapped, many of them. They loved Cuba, but they were just so limited. They could only make a certain amount of money, and it was hard for them to leave. And so they sort of had to like free themselves within Cuba.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have to turn my lights on in my office.
Yeah, no worries.
They go off automatically. Okay, so we should say that there are some images from this next series that are a bit sensitive, because you're documenting the Arab Spring that quickly turned into war. So just as a, I just think it's important to mention that for people. But yeah, so Libya.
So Libya was, one thing I didn't mention is the square imagery in this is all made with an iPhone, which is still my primary recording device these days. This is in the beginning, though. This is in 2011, the early part of 2011. I think I was using an iPhone 3 or 3S. And the application I was using on the phone was very slow. You could take one photograph every 15 seconds or so, and many times it would crash and you would lose your images. And so, but I was there in Libya for other reasons, of course. I'm a photographer, so I'm going to photograph. But I went there because of what I had seen on TV, on CNN. I was living in China at the time, and much of my work was in China, which felt very restrained. And I was there for several years, and there was something about Libya, and that actually began in Egypt, when I was watching on CNN the uprising, and just huge amounts of youth, mostly on the street, and I was really drawn to that environment. Though I missed Egypt. I ended up not going. I sort of hesitated. I wasn't sure if that was sort of the place for me to be. This hesitation has sort of occurred a few times in my career where I've missed major events because I thought, well, there's going to be a lot of photographers, or for whatever reason. But when I find myself questioning something, then I usually avoid going, because the question in itself says to me that there's something about it that is not quite right. So with Libya, there was no question. I had to be on the plane and I had to go there, and it was really just it was going, and so I could see and experience this place more than photograph it. And it was also it was many things, but one thing it was for me photographically was a teaching, in that that the strong work, the real work and the honest work that that comes from this genuine sense inside us. Of course, it has to start with a feeling that is pure and real, and it can't be made up. And
There's also this you and I talked about Joseph Cornell and you being introduced to his work in college and the notion
Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell.
Excuse me, and the
No
notion
worries.
the hero's journey. And I think about that a lot in some of these works. We're sadly going to have to pick the pace up a little bit because I do
Okay.
want to get to Skid Row. But so this is when you first started working with an iPhone, I believe, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So these are some examples on the subway, I believe.
Yeah, and I included these just to show the the novelty of the phone at that point was just
What year was
so
that?
amazing for me. And many of these were shot from like an inch away or a couple inches away. This is 2011, I think January. So this is right before Libya. But this is I was living in China. I was living in Beijing, and this is the subway line that ran literally right below my apartment. And this is in Egypt. And
So this is the part I did want to show some of your commercial work. I'm going to clip this along pretty quickly, but I think it's really important. Commercial work and paid work is really important for many artists and of course photojournalists. And so these are some of the projects that you were really, that meant a lot to you. Is that fair to say? Or
yeah.
that influenced your personal work?
Yeah, these were some of my first assignments for National Geographic, which were adventure stories. I think I did 3 or 4 adventure stories for them, and I did city story and a couple other things. But yeah, these were very much. Some of them were very challenging physically. I sort of realized while doing these, I was having these amazing experiences in these beautiful places, but I also realized that I wasn't an adventure photographer, that I could do these things and I could keep up and I could be out there, but it wasn't where my heart was. I was bored much of the time, even though I was in these incredible places. But these experiences also helped me realize that I could, they gave me like a certain confidence in a way. And this is back in Congo also for Nat Geo and other parts of Central Africa. This is Tanzania.
And so here's some for the Times.
Yeah. Yeah, again, this was an incredible assignment. That was hung out with Jane Goodall for a week at her home and on the lake in Lake Tanganyika, and this is one of the early assignments too. This is for Fortune magazine.
So when you're on assignment, do you use your iPhone? Are you pretty much exclusively iPhone now?
Not exclusively. So usually I'll have my like a 35 millimeter camera with me. I also use medium format quite a bit. So like with the Skid Row project, I have quite a bit of medium format work on my Mamiya, but I just haven't scanned it. But yeah, the phone is really, it's
Did you use it for this shot?
I did.
became the cover of New York Magazine in May, which was right at the end of May, or maybe this was June.
I think this was early June. Yeah, it was at the end of that week. A week full of marches and protests, and
So this is LA.
this is LA. Yeah, this is all LA. Yeah, there's more of this work on my website. Sort of like, and again, this was another project that sort of I came, of course, this was news around the world, and but I was working on Skid Row, and I saw a friend who's a news photographer down there, and he told me there was going to be a protest. I hadn't heard anything about it, so I began just by sort of being a part of the protest, and then photographed it. But yeah, I don't know how many miles we walked that week.
Are there
But it was an
still,
incredible experience. There was, the atmosphere was very similar to other places that and experiences I had in the past in places of uprising and conflict, where there was this very real, like, sense of the streets and the city being, belonging to the people. We really had some massive marches here.
are they still marching in New York? There's still plenty of marching and, bike riding and kind of caravanning happening.
Yeah, there's still events and there's still marches, and every day in multiple locations there are events going on. Just I think 4 or 5 days ago there was a fairly big march right downtown, and
So you had gotten into Skid Row, or became kind of, it caught your attention in December 2019, because there was a march of homeless on City Hall that you had told me about. And that's what brought you to, well, it brought their plight to your attention, more to your attention. And then you started actively photographing Skid Row. So can you tell us a little bit about, I didn't realize it was such an old encampment in LA. I didn't know that it had been there for years and years. And
yeah,
so.
I don't even know how many years, but it began a while ago. I want to say like 100 years ago or more. The Union Rescue Mission, one of the missions down there, is over 100 years old, and sort of much of the initial population consisted of hobos, and there were a lot of people left who, came into the city on the trains, and at that time the train station was near Skid Row, closer to Skid Row, and you had all these hotels, and that was kind of the center of the town in a way. And but the population really increased in the 80s with the crack epidemic, and also with the deinstitutionalization in the late 70s, I believe, when they began releasing a lot of psychiatric patients with more efficient and effective pharmaceutical drugs, so they could essentially treat them as outpatients. But my interest in working there and walking around and meeting people was really born when I first moved here to LA a few years ago. I've been living here a little over 3 years, and I drove through there, and it really reminded me of places I had seen in other countries, with all the tents on the side of the road, and just material scattered all over in the community, on the streets, sharing things, and there was an energy to it that was very raw, and in some ways horrific and in other ways beautiful. Not to say their situation is beautiful, but there is a beauty in the way many people take care of each other and look out for each other. But it's a place with many layers, and it's been like nearly a couple months since I've been going down there with everything happening in life. But next month I'm going to go into sort of phase 2 of this work.
And you've been filming them as well. So how do they feel about you? What are the relationships like? How do you?
So many of them I'm able to see every time I go there, but there's also many others who I never see again. It is a place that there's many transients, but Skid Row is sort of the center of LA for the homeless, because it's where you have all the services you need: shelter, food, health, and so it's often that I've seen people on Skid Row that I've seen in other parts of LA. I was beginning, before I stopped going down there in the early part of the summer, I was beginning to sort of branch out into the other parts of the city. We have many encampments around LA, including at the bottom of my hill where I live. And that's also one of the reasons why I began this project, because, we have homeless people everywhere in our neighborhood. So it's in front of us every day. So we live with it anyway, in that sense. And now with COVID and everything happening with the economy, it's many people are saying it will only increase.
Really increase.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you've talked about it as, you've connected it to some things, some feelings that you had about your experience in Congo, the way that people self-organize, or the way that there are layers of kind of government organization that you don't see. And you've described this, wanting to just sort of understand how this community works, and you're learning more about that. And some, kind of deeper, darker truths about the layers of exploitation that happen to these people.
Mm-hmm. They live a life that is, they are exploited every day, just in the way they live. Their privacy is they live, and they live on the street, and so their activities, everything they do, is outside, and it's a complicated place to work, because for one, when you try and, at least from my experience working independently, I tried to get access into so many organizations down there, and it's, I wasn't able to, of course, for reasons of privacy and, for many other reasons. So it sort of has been, my approach has consisted of just walking around and meeting people, and just going back again and again, and becoming someone who's a known entity on the street. And it's complicated because much of the population has some kind of psychiatric mental condition that is generally connected somehow with trauma. And that has really been what continues bringing me back, besides the fact that I live in LA and my taxes go into this issue, and ultimately go to these people. I am a citizen, and I want to see what's happening, and if this the system is working. But it's also my identification with some of what these people are going through, and just having an understanding, having had PTSD myself and having surmounted PTSD. I mean, I think I'll probably always have elements of it for the rest of my life, but learning how to deal with it and understanding those energies, just I see it in so many people down there, and I feel for these people. And I mean, as a photographer, it's very difficult because how much do we show and how much do we hide? It's also a very sensitive subject. And so, but one thing I've learned with this, which is really kind of the first time that I've worked on a more long-term project in America for many, many years, is that the context is, of course, crucial. And when showing these images, and so I've learned quite a bit about that while working on this project. So Snapseed.
So my last question for you was to leave us with an image that you might portend a future, a kind of future that you're, interested in, or something that, from all of the subjects and the trauma that you've seen, the places that you've gone, and you chose this. So can you explain that?
Yeah,
And
these
this
are
is
the hands.
just so Danny knows, we're going to do the Q&A right after.
Yeah. This is my hand and the hand of my partner Lauren and the hand of our little baby Poppy. Well, now she's a toddler. She's 19 months, but this is within a few weeks of her birth, and it's here at our home. And it's, I mean, how do you explain how you feel after having a child? But my mother has been here for nearly a month now, because Lauren had a major operation at the beginning of the month and hasn't been able to be at home. And my mother said the other night, Poppy saved you. You know that, right? Because it was near the end of, I had been working on sort of, I'd been living with PTSD more or less for a couple years, and trying to surmount it and manage it. And her coming into the world, my daughter entering the world at a time when I was kind of at the very end of that process, was like a window into another universe. And really becoming a father has taught me so much about humans, and it's also given me a hope that I haven't had for a really long time. I think I was looking in some pretty murky parts of the world and societies for a number of years, and she's just pure joy and love. And so this is the future vision that I have for us. It's positive.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It does feel like, I know we probably went over time and Danny's coming on now, but that each one of these pictures could take its own hour. So I urge everybody to go onto your website and also to ICP's website and Brattleboro Museum's website and take a look at the Infinity Award film as well. So thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate it.
Oh, you guys, that's such a beautiful way to end. Maybe we can do the Q&A and leave that picture up here while
Sure.
while we're talking. Thank you both, and I want to second what Katie just said. You know, doing these kinds of events is new for all of us, and you know, I know, Michael, this is the first one you've done, and the first thing I just want to say is I just feel like it's so generous of you to just say, yes, you'll do this. And then to allow us to share your pictures and to, you know, give us some insight into who you are and what's behind the work. So I can't thank you enough for that.
Yeah, it's my honor, really. Thank you, Danny. Appreciate it.
And it's always like this, that it's like, it feels like we could linger so much longer on every picture and take so much more time. And so I just want to echo what Katie said, which is I certainly plan to go to your website and elsewhere to really spend more time looking at these images and reading your books and things. And I hope others will do that too. So thank you to Katie and Michael, and also to all of you who have stuck around here. And so now we have time for some questions, which I'm going to try to manage here. I have a couple that have come in. Here's one from a friend. It says, amazing work, Michael. I haven't seen you since we were in Dubai together. Do you ever feel the need to present a solution, an agenda, or call to action with these projects, especially the Skid Row body of work? I never know, and I'm going to remember next time we do an event like this to, I would like to have a clearer understanding when we get to the Q&A if people want to be identified or not. I never know if I should say this is a question from so-and-so, but in this case, I'm going to say this is a question from the amazing photographer, Allison Wright.
Hey, Allison.
So her question was, do you ever feel the need to present a solution, an agenda, or a call to action with these projects, especially the Skid Row body of work?
Yeah, for sure. With Skid Row, it's still very much in progress, but eventually, yes, throughout this work, throughout the time I've spent on it so far, people have contacted me independently asking how they may help, and whether it's, you know, dropping clothes off at my house or sending money to organizations. So I have been able to sort of help that way, and that was also greatly sort of came about after the National Geographic ran some of the work on their website, and that really helped too. But certainly, as I go further down the road with this project, I do want to do something on a larger scale to help organize for these people. Yeah, I definitely, you know, I've spent, I guess I've been working professionally for a little over 15 years, but most of the past 10 years or so have just been on the road, like non-stop photographing and just making content. And really it's only been in the past couple years or so that I have reflected more on how to, you know, how to create call to actions and such. But yeah, I want to do more of that here in the coming year as I continue with this work.
Thank you. So a related question that has come in is, it seems like, and maybe you've sort of answered it, it seems like much of your work is about showing us things that are hard to look at And is that coming from a place of feeling like almost like an activist's responsibility, like these are important things for people to look at, and that's why I'm going to Libya, or that's why I'm going to Skid Row and making these pictures, because I want people to look at them and want to move the needle on these issues? Is that where that's coming from, or are there too many assumptions built in there about what you're doing?
Yeah, that's always part of it, for sure. And much of it is also my own curiosity about what is happening in these places. And photography is the way that I record those experiences. One of the ways. I do quite a bit of video too. But yeah, I don't have like one an agenda in the sense of going into a place for one specific reason. It's usually a number of reasons. Oftentimes it's something I like to see in the newspaper, or, with Skid Row, just, was driving around the city and I drove through. And I think it was also wanting to uncover with Skid Row this heavy stigma that that pervades the place. I mean, it's really, while working down there, I'll constantly see people driving by in their cars and taking photographs or slowing down and taking pictures and then continuing. It's like not a lot of people go down and spend time there. It's really a place that people avoid. And so I had a curiosity about that. Why are people so afraid of this place? And who are these people and what's happening here? And I often find that is something, that it is a stigma that has been blown out of proportion. And I think Skid Row is one of those places where it's not the safest place in LA, but it is a place where most of the people are good people living in hard situations, and just walking around and being down there and spending time with them can be a huge thing for them. Just having some face time and having someone there to listen. So yeah, my intentions are generally more about following my own curiosity about these issues, and and then later, of course, if they can have an effect, down the road, great.
Yeah.
But
yeah, interesting. So Steve notes that your work is both aesthetically beautiful and emotionally heartbreaking, and asks, how do these coexist for you?
That's a great question, Steve. That was behind all of my questions, the fact that he knits these two things together.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe part of that is because of where I grew up. I grew up in, as you saw, some of the photographs. The Skagit Valley is an incredibly beautiful farming community, and I grew up in a very protected environment and family, and but yeah, photography was a way to communicate, and also a way to find beauty in the world, and to find myself in the world in a sense, and I think I sort of I using that as like my framework as someone interested in making photographs that will draw you in, maybe because there's something beautiful, something aesthetically pleasing that will draw you into the frame, and so you're interested just became something that I tried to apply, in all the work that I did afterward, including now. It's not that I'm trying to make beautiful photographs, but it's I feel like making a photograph that is not somehow aesthetically pleasing, when I'm working with something visual, photography, it's all about having, the power is really in its emotional impact. The picture's worth 1,000 words or what have you. It's more than just information. It can give you, some insight. It can help create this empathy in a viewer, and so there has to be something emotional about the photograph, and so you can respond in an emotional way. So if that makes sense, with Skid Row as an example of a place where things are happening that are not always so pleasing, but presenting that in a way that I'm sort of, it's like, this is my methodology, but it's also something that I'm not sort of completely comfortable with, because I don't want the photographs to come across as just being, visually pleasing or beautiful photographs.
Yeah.
But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Well, I would second it, and I think you've explained it really well, and it's that balance between the pictures being aesthetically pleasing, I don't know, but well made, even though, yet the content is heartbreaking. It's that combination where you really generate the emotional impact that you're trying to generate through a visual medium. Do you think that with Poppy in your life, your days of traveling all around the globe are behind you, or less, or what are you imagining in the future for your work?
Yeah, I don't know. I do have one Congo trip planned. I have to go back and check some information and photograph a couple more things. But yeah, I think I'll probably always be out there as much as I can. But I do have, I mentioned earlier, sort of running around the world and making a lot of content without much reflection.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've really developed more of a reflective sense here in the past couple of years, just spending more time at home, and it's given me sort of a I sort of have a new plan, before I go to these places, to be a little more aware of the reasons why I'm going. I mean, I think I've always, for myself, I've always had good reasons, but now it's like every minute away from home is a minute away from home. It's funny. When she was first born, it was, just this incredible time, and at the same time, I was trying to make work. So it was a hard adjustment as a father, where you want to be producing work, but at the same time, you have to be at home sort of helping. But I sort of initially looked at it as, when I had a break, I would look at it as, oh great, I have a break, I can rest, or I can work, or I can do. But now I look at it very differently. It is a break when I have space, when I have the time, and so I can do my own things. But every minute away from her is a minute away from her, ultimately. I understand now that it's really, it sounds cliche, and it is, but it's really not about me and my work, of course. It's really about my relationship with her, my relationship with my partner. These are things that are real, and they're alive, and this is my life. And whereas my life in the past was always just making work and being out there. So yeah. So yeah, I look at it a little more intensely now. When I leave the home, why am I really leaving? What are the reasons? And how can I be more efficient? I've certainly learned how to be much more efficient with my time.
I think a lot of us who are parents totally understand what you're saying. I certainly do. Michael, for people who are interested in learning more about your work and digging deeper, where should they go to do that?
Yeah, certainly my website is one place, and my Instagram is another place. Those are kind of my primary sort of home resting spots for the work that I have online.
Okay.
But certainly, yeah, I'm hoping that I can get these Congo books out by the winter, and the Libya book.
Are your earlier books in print?
They are, yeah. So one book is called Libyan Sugar, and the other is called Soy Fidel, and they are both available online on Amazon.
Podcast, right?
Sorry?
You've been working on a podcast.
Yes.
So that's
yes. New. Yeah, with a friend of mine, we're working on starting a podcast. So we've been doing some practice runs with some friends. And yeah, I'm excited about that. It's about primarily about storytelling.
How will we find that podcast when it's out?
Well, yeah, hopefully it'll be up here in the next couple of weeks, but I will post about it on my Instagram.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Katie, is there anything else that you wanted to ask or add or say?
Oh, I went so off script with all my questions, and there were some just really good ones in there that we didn't touch on, but we'll have a part 2 some other time.
Sure. You know what I'll throw out there as a possibility to consider too? We have a really great blog for the museum. It's called artlovescompany.org, and it's mainly like discussions, interviews, conversations with the people connected to the art. So curators, artists, volunteers at the museum, staff at the museum, visitors, things like that. So if at some point you two have an appetite to like dig deeper and put that together as a written interview,
sure,
we would certainly share that on our blog.
Oh, that's great, Danny. Thank you.
I'd love to. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you one last time to both of you. Michael, I feel so privileged to have been introduced to you and your work. So thank you for that. And Katie, it's just a joy to be working together with you and continuing to do so. So looking forward to other things we have coming up together, including you're going to be here at the museum giving a walkthrough of the Stephen Kinder exhibit, I think at the end of August, right?
August 27th, yeah.
August 27th. Okay, great. And then we'll be live streaming that walkthrough.
Great.
So hopefully some of you who've stuck around for this conversation will tune back in for that. And thank you to all of you who tuned in tonight. Special thank you to Allison for joining us. Allison's work is up here at the museum right now. And hope I'll get to see all of you in the flesh at some point before too long.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Danny. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to you both.
Have a good night. Stay well. Wear your masks. Vote. Do all the things we need to do.
Yes.
Wash your hands. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much.
You.
Good night.
See ya.
Good night.